She collapsed for the third time. The run was not completed. Time expired. Her legs were shaking. Her lungs were burning. Commander Dawson came over. He looked at her with the same expression. The third time. You failed again, he said. His voice was heavy not from exhaustion, but from disappointment. This isn't for you. Being a soldier isn't for everyone. It's time to quit. The woman tried to stand up. Her legs wouldn't hold. She fell again. Around her, other candidates were passing by. They had succeeded. She had not. For the third time, Dawson closed her file. He wrote in red on it, "Insufficient. There is no fourth attempt. Understand? You're done." The woman raised her head. There were no tears in her eyes, no anger, just silent determination. Because he didn't know that 5 years later, on the same track, in the same test, but this time the whistle would be in her hand. Commander Dawson would be working under her command, and that track would be where she broke records. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Veteran Stories so you never miss these extraordinary tales of courage under fire. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Her name was Lauren Pierce, though on that third failed attempt, her name didn't matter much. What mattered was the stopwatch that had clicked past the maximum allowed time. What mattered was her body giving out. What mattered was Commander Thomas Dawson looking at her with that mixture of pity and finality that said everything without words. She was 23 years old, had wanted to be a soldier since she was 12, had applied to basic training after finishing college, and had now failed 3 times. The United States Army Basic Combat Training at Fort Benning was designed to transform civilians into soldiers in 10 weeks. Physical training, weapons qualification, tactical exercises, mental resilience. The standards were clear. The standards were non-negotiable. And Lauren Pierce couldn't meet them. Not the first time. Not the second time. Not the third time. The problem wasn't attitude. Wasn't intelligence. Wasn't dedication. The problem was her body. She was 5'4", small frame, limited upper body strength. And no matter how hard she trained between attempts, the obstacle course defeated her. The run times barely met requirements and sometimes didn't. The endurance tests left her collapsed while others kept going. Commander Dawson had been the senior training officer for 8 years, had seen thousands of recruits, had learned to spot who would make it and who wouldn't. Usually by week 3. Lauren Pierce, he'd spotted by day 5. First attempt. Watched her struggle through the confidence course. Watched her barely complete the 2-mile run. Watched her fail the combat water survival test. When she didn't pass, he pulled her aside. "This isn't a judgment of your character," he'd said. "But the Army has standards. Physical standards. They exist for a reason. Combat doesn't adjust to your limitations." She'd come back 6 months later. Second attempt. Dawson had been surprised. Most people who failed didn't return. She'd clearly trained. Was stronger. Faster. But not enough. She passed more tests this time. Made it to week 7. Then failed the 12-mile ruck march. Couldn't carry the required weight at the required pace. Dawson had been less gentle the second time. "I admire your persistence," he'd said. "But there's a difference between persistence and delusion. You're putting yourself through this pain for nothing. The military isn't the only way to serve." Now, third attempt, she'd made it to week 8. Further than before. But the final endurance test had broken her. The test everyone called the breaker because it tested everything at once. Run, climb, carry, crawl, navigate. All while exhausted. All while being evaluated. Most recruits passed. Some barely. Some easily. Lauren had collapsed at mile 3 of the 5-mile run portion. Completely spent. Nothing left. Dawson had driven out to the course in his Jeep. Had watched her try to stand. Fail. Try again. Fail. He'd seen enough. There is no fourth attempt, he'd told her. Not because regulations forbid it, but because he did. He had authority to deny re-entry to candidates he deemed unfit. And after 3 failures, that authority was unquestionable. He'd written insufficient, permanent in her file. That word, permanent, meant something. Meant the door was closed. Lauren had sat in the dirt, sweating, defeated, and looked up at him. She wanted to argue. Wanted to say she'd try again. But her body had betrayed her 3 times. What could she say? That the 4th would be different? But here's something important about failure that most people misunderstand. There are 2 types. Failure that proves you can't, and failure that teaches you how. Lauren's first failure taught her about her physical limits. Her second failure taught her about training methodology. Her third failure taught her something deeper. It taught her that the system wasn't designed for people like her. Small, female, different body type. The standards were built around average male physiology. And while those standards served a purpose, they also excluded people who might succeed differently. She left Fort Benning that day with no plan to return. Dawson had been clear. The Army was close to her. But something burned inside her. Not anger at Dawson. Not resentment at the system. But a question. If she couldn't meet the standards, could she change how people were taught to meet them? Could someone with her experience of struggle teach better than someone who'd never struggled? She didn't know. But she wanted to find out. Lauren spent the next year working as a personal trainer. Specialized in clients who'd been told they couldn't. Overweight people. Older people. People with injuries. She learned how to work with limitations. How to build strength progressively. How to adapt exercises. How to motivate people who'd been told no. She was good at it. Really good. Her clients achieved things they'd thought impossible. But it wasn't enough. The military still called to her. Not as a soldier. As something else. She went back to school. Got certified in exercise science. Studied kinesiology. Learned the actual science behind physical training. Learned why certain methods worked and others didn't. Learned that a lot of military PT was based on tradition rather than optimization. Wrote papers on adaptive training methodology. On improving success rates for diverse body types. On reducing injury rates while maintaining standards. Her master's thesis was titled Rethinking Physical Preparedness, Evidence-Based Training for Modern Military Readiness. It was noticed. 3 years after her third failure, Lauren was working as a civilian contractor, designing fitness programs for military spouses and family members. She built a reputation. The programs worked. Success rates were high. Injuries were low. People who'd struggled found success. The Defense Department noticed. Started asking questions. Could these methods work for actual recruit training? Could they improve the historically stubborn failure and injury rates in basic training? Would she be willing to try? The offer came from an unexpected place. Fort Benning was redesigning its basic training curriculum, looking for civilian experts to consult. Lauren's name was on a list. She almost didn't apply. The thought of returning to the place that had defeated her 3 times was painful, but the opportunity was too significant. She applied, got an interview, then another, then a job offer, not as a consultant, as the Director of Physical Training Development. Civilian position. GS, 13 pay grade. She would design the new PT curriculum, train the trainers, oversee implementation, and report to the base commander. She accepted. 5 years after her third failure, Lauren Pierce drove back through the gates of Fort Benning. Not as a recruit, a staff. Her office was in the same building where she'd received her failure notices. The irony wasn't lost on her. The first week was orientation, meeting staff, learning protocols, and then, inevitably, seeing him. Commander Thomas Dawson, still senior training officer, still evaluating recruits, still operating under the old system, the system that had failed her, or that she had failed, depending on perspective. Their first meeting was awkward. Dawson recognized her immediately. "Pierce," he said. His face was difficult to read. "I heard you were coming." Didn't believe it. She nodded. "I'm here to improve the program." He studied her. "The program doesn't need improving. It's worked for decades." "It's worked for some," she corrected. "Not for everyone." "It's not supposed to work for everyone," he said. "It's supposed to work for soldiers." The tension was immediate. Philosophical. He believed standards selected the fit. She believed training created fitness. He saw his job as filtering. She saw hers as building. Let's pause here. Because what happened next wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a revenge story. It was something more nuanced. Lauren didn't come back to prove Dawson wrong. She came back to prove something could be better. Her curriculum wasn't about lowering standards. It was about better preparing people to meet them. The changes she implemented were evidence-based. Periodized strength training instead of random PT. Proper running progression instead of immediate max distance attempts. Injury prevention protocols. Mental resilience training. Nutrition optimization. Sleep education. All backed by research. all designed to reduce failures and injuries while maintaining combat readiness standards. The first cycle under the new program began 6 months after she arrived. Dawson was skeptical, vocal about it, argued in meetings that she was softening soldiers, making training easier, coddling recruits. But he was also military. He followed orders. The base commander had approved the new curriculum, so Dawson implemented it, reluctantly, with frequent complaints, watching for the moment it would fail so he could say he'd been right all along. But that moment didn't come. The first cycle graduated 89% of its recruits. The historical average was 67%. Injury rates dropped 40%. Physical test scores at graduation were actually higher than under the old system. Better results. Fewer failures. Healthier soldiers. Dawson didn't know what to make of it. One successful cycle could be an anomaly, could be an exceptional group of recruits. But the second cycle matched the results. 88% graduation. Low injuries. High performance. The third cycle was even better. 91%. The data was undeniable. Lauren's methods worked. Better than what had been done for decades. The Army noticed. Other bases wanted the program. Lauren was asked to train trainers from other facilities. Her curriculum became the model. Within 2 years, Fort Benning had the highest success rates in basic training across all Army installations. The base commander credited Lauren publicly, promoted her, within civilian ranks, to senior director, gave her more authority, more budget, more staff. And Dawson? He was assigned to her department, not as punishment, as necessity. The PT program was now under her purview. He was the most experienced training officer on base. His knowledge was valuable, but the hierarchy had changed. He reported to her, took direction from her, implemented her programs. The woman he'd failed 3 times was now his supervisor. The adjustment was difficult for him, not because she was vindictive. She wasn't. She was professional, respectful, never once mentioned their history unless he brought it up. But the reality was unavoidable. He'd told her she'd never make it, and she'd come back and exceeded everything he'd achieved. One day, about 3 years into her tenure, Dawson found himself on the same obstacle course where he'd watched her fail. But this time he was supervising a group struggling with a particular wall climb. The recruits couldn't figure out the technique, kept failing, getting frustrated. Dawson was about to demonstrate when Lauren appeared. She'd been observing from a distance. She walked up to the wall. "Mind if I show them something?" she asked. Dawson stepped back, watched. Lauren, still small, still not the typical soldier build, demonstrated a technique that used leverage and momentum instead of raw upper body strength. Climbed the wall easily, then explained the physics behind it. The recruits tried. Most succeeded immediately. Dawson realized something. She'd learned this the hard way. Through failure. Through figuring out how someone with her limitations could succeed. And that knowledge made her better at teaching than someone who'd never struggled. After the recruits moved on, Dawson approached her. "That was good," he said. First compliment he'd given her. She nodded. "I figured it out during my second attempt. Didn't have enough strength to muscle over. Had to find another way." He hesitated. Then, "I need to say something. And I don't know if you want to hear it." She waited. "I was wrong," he said. "About you. About what you could do. About what you could contribute. I judged you based on one metric. And I missed everything else you had to offer." Lauren considered this. "You weren't entirely wrong," she said. "I wasn't cut out to be a regular soldier. My body couldn't do what was required. But maybe I was cut out for this. Maybe failing was how I learned to teach." Still, Dawson insisted. "I told you there was no 4th attempt. I closed that door. That was arrogant." She smiled. "You were protecting the standards. I get it. And honestly, if I'd passed on a 4th attempt, I probably wouldn't be here now. I'd be deployed somewhere, doing a job I might have struggled with. Instead, I'm doing this, making sure fewer people fail, making sure the ones who pass are really ready. Maybe this was always where I was supposed to be. But wait, because this is where the story gets even more interesting. In year 4 of Lauren's tenure, the Army proposed a new challenge. They wanted to test whether her methods could work for the most demanding training, Special Forces selection, the Q course, the place where 70% of candidates failed. Could her evidence-based approach help more soldiers become Green Berets without lowering standards? It was controversial. Special Forces culture was built on extreme difficulty. on most people failing. The idea that a civilian fitness expert, especially one who'd failed basic training 3 times, could improve their program was offensive to many. But the Special Operations Command was willing to try. They brought Lauren in as a consultant, asked her to analyze their training, identify inefficiencies, propose modifications. She spent 6 months studying the selection process, found the same issues she'd found in basic training: inadequate preparation, high injury rates, training methods based on tradition rather than science. She proposed changes, not to standards, to preparation, to progression, to recovery protocols, to how candidates were taught to meet the standards. The Special Operations Command implemented a pilot program. The results were dramatic. Completion rates increased from 30% to 44%. Injury rates dropped by half. The soldiers who graduated were tested rigorously. They met every standard, performed every task, but more of them made it because they'd been prepared better. Lauren became something of a legend in military training circles. The woman who'd failed basic training 3 times and revolutionized how the Army trained soldiers. She was invited to speak at military conferences, write articles for military journals, train trainers from allied nations. Her career had gone places she'd never imagined. All because she'd failed. All because failure had taught her what success couldn't. And Commander Dawson? He eventually came around completely, became one of her strongest advocates. When someone questioned whether a civilian who'd never served should have authority over military training, Dawson shut it down. She knows more about preparing soldiers than anyone I've worked with, he'd say. She earned that knowledge the hard way, and we're all better for it. Years later, at a ceremony celebrating Fort Benning's continued high training success rates, Lauren stood at the same track where she'd collapsed. The base commander was giving a speech, talking about innovation, about questioning assumptions, about how sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources. He called Lauren to the front, presented her with a Civilian Service Award, the highest recognition available to non-military staff. As she accepted, she looked out at the audience, saw hundreds of soldiers, instructors, recruits, saw Dawson standing and applauding, saw the track behind her, the same track where she'd failed 3 times, where Dawson had told her she was done, where her dream had died, and where, eventually, it had been reborn as something different, something better. After the ceremony, a young female recruit approached her, nervous. "Ma'am, I'm struggling in training. The run times, the obstacles. I'm afraid I'm going to fail." Lauren looked at her, saw herself 8 years ago. "Are you giving it everything?" she asked. The recruit nodded. "Then you're not failing. You're learning. And learning takes time. Keep going. And if you don't make it this cycle, come back. Keep coming back. Failure isn't the end. It's just information. It tells you what you need to work on." The recruit seemed uncertain. "But what if I never pass? What if I'm just not cut out for this?" Lauren smiled. "Then maybe you're cut out for something else. Something better. Something you haven't discovered yet. I failed 3 times. And it led me here, to helping thousands of people succeed. Your path might not be what you expect. But trust me, the failures aren't wasted. They're preparation." The recruit left, still uncertain but encouraged. Dawson approached Lauren. "You handled that well," he said. "Better than I would have. I would have told her the truth, that most people who struggle early don't make it." Lauren nodded. "You're not wrong. Statistics support that. But statistics don't tell individual stories. Some people are late bloomers. Some people need different preparation. And some people aren't meant to be soldiers, but are meant to do something else important. We can't know which category someone's in until they find out for themselves." Dawson thought about this. "Is that what you were? Not meant to be a soldier, but meant for something else?" Lauren looked at the track, the obstacle course, the training grounds where she'd given everything and come up short. 3 times. "Yeah," she said. "I think that's exactly what I was. And it took failing to figure that out." So what's the moral here? Maybe it's this. Failure doesn't define you unless you let it. Lauren Pierce failed 3 times at the same goal, was told permanently that she wasn't good enough, that the door was closed, and she could have accepted that, could have moved on to something completely different, could have spent her life wondering what might have been. But instead, she took the lessons from failure and built something bigger. She became the person who made sure fewer others had to fail. who made sure the ones who struggled got better support, who proved that sometimes the people who fail understand success better than the people who never struggled. 3 failures became the foundation for a career that changed thousands of lives. And the man who told her she'd never make it ended up working for her. Not because she sought revenge, but because she became the person he was too rigid to be.